So as a brief introduction to Dr. Joseph Kvedar, he, has been a very prominent member of this community in terms of the mHealth kind of movement and evolution. He serves as an advisor for a number of funds and also companies, but then he also serves as an advisor for a number of health accelerators like Blueprint Health and Rock Health in San Francisco. So I'm really glad for him to kick off this conversation about mHealth here at Harvard tonight, for you guys to kind of start meeting people who are like-minded or interested in this space. So with that, I'll turn it over to Joe. Thank you.
Thanks. It's an honor, frankly, to be part of this community, to have so much opportunity for innovation here in Boston, and this is one of the most important foci of innovation, and to be able to kick off the academic year in this way is just terrific for me. And of course, there are a number of you who are friends. I'll be delighted to meet as many of you as possible, and then back again in a month for whatever value I can add at that time. And then finally, the topic, which is quite, we didn't plan it this way, but the fact that the announcement just came out on the iWatch and so forth, I thought it would be really fun to take a journey with you all and try to sort out what's going on in the space of mobile health. Because I think if you're not in it every day, it must seem very confusing. And I think it's confusing for good reason. So we're going to walk through that. This is a maiden voyage for this talk, so feedback is encouraged and welcome. Interactivity is encouraged and welcome. Interrupt me, raise your hand. We'll get through it all. I don't really like to do an hour of soliloquy. I think Shakespeare taught us that soliloquy should be short. So don't be bashful. If you don't interrupt, we'll get done early and you can all go home and have dinner. But if you want to interrupt, please do, and we'll take it as we go. So the question is, 2015 going to be the coming out party for mobile health? Any of you who have followed this area or been involved know that it seems like it's about to happen, it's about to happen. Clearly, smartphones are in almost everyone's hands now. One of our colleagues in the audience, Dr. Roy, who works with the Boston Homeless, did a survey for us and came up with the figure that 40% of the homeless in Boston are carrying smartphones now. So this is very real. But is it the time for us to make big gains in applying these technologies to improving health? So you might say, well, Joe, it's obvious. Look at the names on the slide. All of these companies are now doing big things, allegedly anyway, in mobile health. You've got Apple, we just heard about, Samsung, Microsoft's doing some things. Intel just bought Basis Band. Google has a new thing called Google Fit coming out. So it seems like lots of exuberance, but the question I want to ask, is it irrational exuberance? Because while all of this is going on, I like to remember Santayana's quote, "Those who do not learn from history are doomed to repeat it." So tell me, is Apple's Health Kit going to be any different than Google Health? You all remember Google Health was this really exciting place where you could store your health information in a website and nobody came. So now we're going to put it on a mobile phone. What's different? I don't know. Again, Apple's an amazing company. They do amazing things. None of this, by the way, is about dissing any company or, when I get into later, about praising any company. It's just asking questions thoughtfully. So is Health Kit going to be any different? We don't really know, but early signs are maybe not. Samsung, right, they have S Health. This is about the third or fourth generation of their, it's right there on the phone. You buy the Galaxy, you get this lovely app. Barely a whisper, not much going on there, not many people adopting, wonder why. Microsoft, Samsung, Apple, all coming out with smart watches, $300 or $400 to wear something on your wrist that doesn't look very attractive. Measures a lot of things about you. I don't know, is that going to do it? They seem to think so. Will it be the difference maker? We'll see in January if Apple can crack that one. And then Aetna, which, again, if some of you follow this field, you'll know that Aetna, about 3 years ago, pretty far ahead of the curve. And Mark Bertolini, who's their CEO, is a fabulous speaker. If you ever get to hear him talk about his challenges in running an insurer the size of Aetna and his vision, He's worth the price of admission. And 3 years ago, he came out at a meeting called the mHealth Summit and said, we're going to put everything on mobile devices, and people are going to gather around it and share, and it's going to be this great thing for our members. They called it CarePass, and nobody came. So they just shut it down. So there's something about this, and all I'm suggesting is it isn't quite what meets the eye. That there's, right, anyone who has any kind of analytic feel would say, oh, something not quite right here. You've got certainly all these predictions from the consultants. You've probably seen them. $1.95 billion in 2012, predicted to be $49 billion by 2020. Wearables predicted to be $12 billion by 2018. Lots of consumers saying wearables may impact their view of wellness and fitness. So that's all positive. Something else that is worth reflecting on for a couple of minutes as we set this whole thing up is payment reform. I don't know how many of you are directly involved in healthcare or healthcare administration, but the Affordable Care Act did something really powerful, and it opened the possibility for us as providers to share risk with the people that pay the bills, the insurers or the government. And I could give another hour talk on just how powerful that is, because it changes our whole business model as healthcare providers. It does two really powerful things. One is that we have to start viewing all of our former big ticket items like transplants and cardiac bypass grafts and stents, and all those become cost to us now because we're supposed to manage a population and a budget. And all the things that used to be kind of expenses that we just passed through, because in a cost plus budgeting you pass things through, all those become opportunities now for us to be actually efficient, and that's how we're going to make a living. Very dramatic. So that's one thing that it did. And the second is it frees us up a little bit from this trouble that we were in, where the only way we could ever make a living was by having you come to a facility and charging someone for that visit or that hospital stay. That's out now. We can, because we're sharing with savings, we're at risk with our payer, we can do all kinds of creative things. It's really worth pointing that out. Now, you'll see as I talk through this, that gives us an opportunity, and virtual care is on everyone's mind now, at least in this delivery system where I work. It's very popular. But as we look at mobile health, it creates some interesting challenges. Now, what makes this company worth $20 billion? Anyone want to hazard a guess? What's that? The number of users. Sure. And why do people flock to Snapchat or WhatsApp or Instagram? Because there's this basic human need to share, to communicate. You make it easy. It's free. You download it. You work. You do. And that happens. So that's the typical app strategy that's out there that's so successful, is give the people what they want and they'll come, right? Build it and they'll come. This has become, as I said, teenagers are doing this every day. But in healthcare, if we're in the business of improving your health, if we just build something that people want to flock to, we'll attract this kind of individual, already fit, already healthy, already wearing, in this case, I think it's a Fitbit. And we're probably misplacing our resources because we really didn't need to spend a lot of resources on getting that person healthy. They were already committed to being healthy, right? Then you've got this crowd. These are the people you want to be involved. But these guys are off having a pint or whatever else, a burger. And seriously, believe me, none of them are wearing activity trackers. They're not downloading MyFitnessPal, right? So there's this disconnect between sort of who will use the stuff and who we want to use the stuff. These are the people we really like to have as users. So health apps are different, right? So this is a picture of castor oil. I grew up in the 60s. If we were, if our moms thought we had ingested something that might be poisonous, we had to take castor oil, which was a vile-tasting liquid. The idea that sometimes you have to take medicine because it makes you better, right? So even though we know that people might need these apps, they don't necessarily want them. That's the difference. Everyone wants the Snapchats and the WhatsApp, but I can offer you a health app that will improve your ability to lose 10 pounds. It might be so invasive that you take it off your phone the next day, right? So that's a difference. As physicians, we often think that we're giving you kind of an insight into how to improve your health. You may or may not want to hear that insight or act on it. About 1 in 10 adults in the US population owns a health tracker, but as you can see, about 1/3 of them end up in the drawer within 6 months. That's not acceptable if you're trying to improve the health of a population. If I'm at risk for you as a population and I give all of you a health tracker and 1/3 of you throw it in the drawer, that's wasted resources on my part. It's a very different mindset that we have to take. 80% of health apps that are downloaded are abandoned within 2 weeks. Why? Because again, they're not compelling. It's not like Snapchat. Here's a story from our own center, and it gives me a opportunity to digress just a minute and say a little bit about what we do at the center. We're 40-ish individuals dedicated to innovating in this space of connected health. We really do a lot of early stage work around how to change the way care is delivered using these technologies. Our vision is that you shouldn't, in most cases, have to visit a professional in a space to get health care done. That it should be a continuous function in your life. And no better time than the technology pictured on this slide to make that happen, because it's always on, always available, we can message you in the moment, etc. Now, we check these things a lot, as it turns out. I heard a story on NPR about a year ago, and it really changed my mind, opened my mind, because it was about how most people, it turns out, they've done fMRI and other sophisticated studies. When you pick that phone up to check it 150 times a day, you're getting a little rush of dopamine. So it's like an addictive response. It's an addictive concept, and it truly is. And those of you who, I notice in this crowd, there are not many phone checkers. There's always a few. But if you're sitting there thinking, I wish I could check my phone, but I got to listen, you know what I'm talking about. It's a craving, right? This is very real. Now, let me contrast that to this experience. So this is from our group. Again, this is a program called Blood Pressure Connect, which we run. And the idea here is the way it works is, pretend I'm a primary care doctor. I'm not, but I could play one on TV. And you're the patient, and I say, in order to help us manage your blood pressure, I'd like for you to enroll in this program. All you have to do is take this bag home. It's got a blood pressure cuff and a plug computer called the hub. You plug the hub into the wall, and you start uploading your blood pressures. And we'll coach you. We'll get those pressures, and if they're out of, you'll hear from our nurse or our pharmacist, whoever's managing the program, because that person's looking at a dashboard view of the whole population. Well, that's how that program works. And here are 2 different hubs that we happen to have in the field at one point. The newness of technology largely in this space is in this part, the hub. How do I get the reading out of the blood pressure cuff and into the cloud so I can do interesting things with it, analyze it, use it for a feedback loop, use it to coach you, etc. So that's where a lot of the newness comes. And it happened to be, in this case, we had the one on the left where you can see that blue button, and you have to push that button to upload your blood pressure. And the one on the right, which is seamless or frictionless, right? You take your blood pressure, it winds up in our database like magic. People who had the device on the left uploaded, remember, their doctor told them, we really want you to do this. They're uploaded 3 times fewer uploads than the people on the right. The act of pushing a button inhibited that much their activity. And in fact, we know that engagement follows outcomes. Their outcomes were less. So while you check your phone 150 times a day, I can't get you to push a button once a day to improve your health. That's how dramatic this is. Yes, sir.
So I'm accepting your invitation to interrupt and ask some questions, because as you're looking at these, I think of successful innovations that, so there was and first of all, there were very simple ideas to replace a job to be done. Someone did a job and they replaced it with something that was automated.
Yep.
A classmate of mine at this illustrious institution, a woman named Donna Dubinsky, was on the team that created the Palm Pilot. That wasn't a platform on which to make your life better. It was just to replace your date book.
Right.
It happened to be a platform, and you could load other apps to it, which was one of the things that was important about it as it grew. But the key was it just replaced your date book. And as Microsoft was coming out with all of these things that would do everything, including tie your shoes, the people at Palm said, this is great. As long as they're so unfocused, we're going to be successful. They were until they got bought and then sold, and that got screwed up. But the other one, and it was the same story, was Intuit. I wasn't in Scott Cook's class, but all that did was try and replace the checkbook. This was something that people did, and they hated it, and you had to do it, but this allowed you to do this in an automated way. So I would ask you with all of these things, what's the job that people have to do that this can automate for them?
Sure. And that's very insightful. I don't think there's an easy answer to that. That's part of the challenge because it's abstract. The answer is you want to be healthy, you want to feel good, and you want to live longer. That's the job that needs to be done. But to put that in something as bite-sized as a Palm Pilot or any of those other examples, I don't think anyone's figured that out yet. So we'll walk through this, and maybe you'll have some other ideas that'll spring to mind as I talk about some of the examples. When I get to the examples, some of the companies are doing some of the things right some of the time. That's where we are with this. Nobody's got the whole thing figured out. And that's an insightful comment that people, I don't say it that way, but I do. I mean, people go through their life not thinking about health like it's a need to get done. It's an option. Yes?
But in comment to that, I mean, there were MP3 players out there long before the iPhone and its predecessor, the
iPod.
But Apple, took a cumbersome thing to use, like the thing on the left, and made it into something that everybody, is
Wanted
very
to.
ubiquitous. and
Yeah.
wanted.
Yep.
So, I think what you're driving at is the solutions that we bring into the healthcare field need to be in the workflow and simple and easy for both the doctor.
That's one theme for sure. Yeah.
Experience.
So anyway, just to finish this concept, it's one of the things we learned amongst many in doing this work is that asking individuals to do almost anything inhibits a fairly large chunk of them if it has to do with their health. It's not the same as saying there's something out there called Snapchat and you download it and you're good, you're sending pictures and so forth. It just isn't that sticky. That's my point. So the idea here is don't confuse education with inspiration. We do that as healthcare providers a lot. We think if we can educate you that you're going to lose a year or two if you don't stop smoking or whatever, that somehow is going to be inspiring, and it's not. And products in the mobile space that work are inspiring something, to your point. So I would say then what we're missing, this is my hypothesis, and this is what really the rest of the conversation is going to be about, is we're missing engagement in these health-related tools, that it somehow is just not top of the list to take your blood pressure and upload it, or just to download MyFitnessPal and enter your meals, or any of these things that, most people, again, just to say it again, there's about 5% of the population that we call them quantified selfers or fitness buffs. That's the market that all of these companies are selling into now. It's a small fraction of the population, but they care enough. They're either quantitative, they care enough, or they just get off on like life logging, right? But most of the people out there do not find this compelling. And again, if those of you who are out there wanting to start companies, that's an enormous opportunity because no one's figured it out yet. So let's say, how are we going to engage people? And this is my framework. So it starts with something we've already discussed a little bit, frictionless technology. I think that's really important. As I said, you can't demand that I do anything extra. It's just got to happen. We'll talk more about that. Social turns out to be really important, and we are learning more and more about that. But because of technology-enabled social networking, we keep learning more and more about how powerful that is, so we'll talk a little bit about that. Personalization is an enormous opportunity, so we're going to talk about what I mean by that, show you some examples of all of these. And then relevance to everyday life. Get it in so that it's not like something, the last thing I want to do at night is take care of my health. Get it in so that it's in the flow and it's relevant to something that you really want to get done today. So let's go through each of those, and for each one I have some either examples from our center or some companies that I think are doing something interesting, and we'll have a dialogue about that. So what do I mean by frictionless? As I said, it means that so believe it or not, there are certain people that we have to take care of as a healthcare provider. So first of all, there are certain people who don't yet own smartphones, but even those who do, some of them are not capable of downloading and installing and running an app. Certainly going through a lot of setup. Yes, please.
Sorry, since you want to engage people, only 5% of the population is engaged, wouldn't it be better to engage the providers and maybe they can set the example for the whole thing?
Well, we could have that debate. It's not an automatic yes.
Right.
It's not an automatic yes, but part of what enables us to at least have a framework for that is this idea of payment reform that I mentioned earlier. And so at least there's an opportunity for that. I have a whole other talk on how we're ineffective as doctors at getting people to do stuff because we tell them to do stuff. It's not compelling. So a lot of these same messages would be giving a group of medical students or physician clues on how to engage people. It's how, the same way a company would do it, I would advise that they might do it.
Getting the medical teams to be more engaged, like nurses and doctors, so they actually are the role models for.
Yep, and I have some thoughts on that, and I agree. It's just not the only solution.
Right.
It's not the only solution. So frictionless turns out to be very important. This is one company that's, and again, there are many. Like I said, I'm not advocating for any one company. I'm not dissing any one company, just making observations. Validic is a company that has decided that they will take any of this input and more. So you see on here some apps, some devices, et cetera, Runkeeper, any of you who know the space, Fitbit, Withings, there's MyFitnessPal on there, Map My Ride, iHealth. And what they'll give you is a unified view of that that's normalized. So for instance, if it turns out that, this is text talk for a minute, but the Withings API, because they're a French company, automatically reverts to kilograms. If you want it in pounds. So they'll do all that and they'll give you a unified view. That's an interesting middleware attempt to help with the frictionless idea, as is this one, Tactio, which is a Canadian company. And another theme, which you'll see over and over again, is beauty and design and attractiveness. We're terrible at that in healthcare. My goodness, there's no healthcare software I've ever seen, speaking of providers, that's useful, that's well designed for doctors or nurses. It's terrible. And we think, therefore, that patients will put up with the same nonsense. And so we have to make things attractive. One of the reasons I like Tactio is their beautiful screens that they're showing their stuff. It's, again, not the only thing. It's kind of a necessary but not sufficient. But it is necessary to get people's attention. You have to have attractive screens in the mobile world to get people's attention.
What does it do?
This is the same kind of thing. It's a middleware aggregator. So I buy a bunch of devices and I get to see them all in one spot, and it gives me some intelligence on how they're connected. All right, so there are again multiple examples, but my point is, and part of why I'm here is to give some young, perhaps young, but people who are engaged and want to get into this space, because there is an enormous opportunity, a few hints. And I'll give you another quick example. I'm an advisor to a company. They've got a medication adherence pill bottle. They're wicked excited about it. They sent me one, and it comes out of the box with no indication that it is charged or needs to be charged, no instruction book, no, nothing. So, and yet it comes with a USB cord. So I called the guy and I said, He said, oh, well, it automatically charges for 3 months. You don't need to worry about that. Well, put a little light on it or something that blinks when it needs to be charged. These are just simple things, but people are not, they're so like, these people were so excited that they could measure a teaspoon, whether I'd actually taken a teaspoon of liquid or not. They designed the whole thing with this wonderful engineering tool, and then they kind of forgot that last step. So that's what I mean by frictionless. Make it easy for people to use. It should be intuitive. It should have all those things that an iPhone or a consumer device would have. Social. So we can spend a lot of time on social. This is really interesting. Social really has 3 components. The first one is camaraderie. We're social beings. We like to spend time with people we care about. We like to do things in groups. So there's all kinds of stuff in the literature and companies that are going after this one, that if you work as a team, you can lose weight as a team, you can do things as a team, you can sign up as a team, you can weigh in as a team, you can get prizes as a team, etc. The second one is competition, which is kind of the flip side of camaraderie. Some people, they like to be part of a social group, but they want to beat everyone. That's okay too, right? Sign them up, right? And part of what we're working on at the center is learning that about you so that we message you in a way that's compelling to you, so that we don't sign you up for, if you're a loner, we won't sign you up. There are certain people who just give me the goal and I'll get there. They're very coachable. But yeah, the social thing, not really. At least not in health. Well, fine, so we'll put you in the coachable category. But we can learn those things about you. So competition is the second one, very powerful. This group, we've done these over the years where office group 1 is competing with office group 2. People will put 10, 20, 30,000 steps on their device just to push the team over the line. The competitive spirit can be very powerful. I think this is the most interesting one. I call it visibility. I have another talk where I call it the sentinel effect. But it's the idea that if you're in a social context, you start, especially with health, you start to care more because you want to look good. You don't want to look like the lazy bum or the fat slob or whatever it is that your negative view of the world is. You kind of want to look good. Now, it's interesting, just to digress, but as those of you who are doctors know, this works because people come in and they tell you aspirationally what they want to do. Like, how much do you exercise? 3 times a week, doc. How much do they really exercise? On a good week, 3 times a week. Maybe once a week, average. But they're thinking of that good week because they want you to know that, well, that's a really powerful psychology, and you can use that in design. For most of us, if we think there's someone watching us, especially someone of authority or someone that we care about, we will up our game to meet that person's expectations. That's the visibility piece. I think it's really powerful. We've demonstrated that certainly a lot of our programs, and I'll show you some examples, in the context of a healthcare provider system, succeed because of that. So here's one on camaraderie. You guys probably know patients like me. God bless them. They've been around for 10, maybe 15 years now. And they've done a really amazing job at getting folks to share data because, well, they're really sad for other people with diseases like MS or ALS, and they just want to help each other out. It's purely, on their part, purely altruistic. Maybe we'll learn something. They do things like their own clinical trials together. They test new medicines. And a new medicine comes out, and it's all over the network. I had this side effect. Don't do that. Ask the doctor about that. Really, really powerful example. The problem here is it doesn't really extend much beyond those illnesses because these people are so committed because they don't really have much else to do, sadly, than report their symptoms to one another. But if you have an illness like high blood pressure or diabetes and you have a life, it's turned out that this isn't a particularly powerful way to get at that. But there's something about camaraderie that we can harness in the right scenarios. Competition. So there are many, many, many wellness programs. This gentleman has, is that the Virgin Pulse tracker? Yeah, so there are many, and one of the other themes about this area when you get into the fitness wellness is this ecosystem theme. You just about, because of this thing called OAuth and APIs, again, tech talk, just about any of these people will let you share their data with another. So if you're withing scale, you can show it on your Fitbit screen. It's interesting. It's hard for any of them to make money because of that, because they're losing their identity. But it's like now there isn't any real, none of them get anywhere if they're siloed. So there are a number of these anyway. Virgin Pulse is interesting. It's Branson. It's another Branson story. And it's a wellness program, and it involves this tracker and things like competitions and things in the work. And they've done a nice job. They've been persistent. They've been around a long time. They go into the workplace and they motivate people as teams to achieve some of these health goals, and they have good outcomes. So that's an example. By no means is it the only example, but they're taking advantage of this. We want to beat the other office group, or we want to, the pathologists are going to compete against the ID docs or something like that. It works for certain settings. This is Visibility. So I promised I'd tell you a little bit about this. So I'm going back to, remember I talked about Blood Pressure Connect with the 2 hubs. This is actually more complete view of the program. So you can see there are 2 different technologies, a glucometer or a blood pressure cuff. One hub that I talked about that sucks the data out of those sensors and moves it to the cloud. Display, as you can see, on a computer screen for either the patient or a provider. And then down on the bottom left is a clinician who's looking at a screen of maybe 50 or 100 of folks on this program from a given practice. And the software, like any other software, will cull out exceptions. So she can say, oh, Mrs. Jones has had blood sugars of 600 3 days in a row at 6 p.m. Let's call her up and see what's going on. And when they make those calls and people get the message that they're watching, behavior changes. Because, again, people want to up their game. They know they're being watched. Now, that can have 2 consequences. We've had patients drop out because they're like, this is too invasive. I don't want to be watched, which is interesting. And societally, we tolerate that, right? You have the right to make yourself sick in this country if you want. But we've also had a lot of people say, this really helped me because it sort of helped keep me honest about tracking my diabetes. And what we know is if people are willing to start tracking anything, really, about their health, it has a sort of top-of-mind effect. So these people also take their medications more on time. They watch their diet better. And as a result, they have better outcomes, which is why you see the 2 outcomes bars in gray. Lower blood pressure for the blood pressure group, lower A1C for the diabetes group, because there's this halo effect around tracking. Once you get people to track and you get this sentinel effect going, there's a sort of a halo concept. They start behaving better, most of them. There are people who bring this stuff home and never track, even though, like I said earlier, the doctor says this would be really good for you. They say, thank you very much, and they throw it in a corner. That's a different group, and this technology allows us to segment in very interesting ways. So maybe we'll come to a point, we've talked about this in the near future, where we identify that person and we start sending a nurse out to their home till they get on the program. But rather than send a nurse to everyone's home, we're now targeting human resources. That's our vision anyway. So visibility in at least the healthcare setting turns out to be really important. One question we're asking, and I don't know the answer, but again, those of you who are entrepreneurial may ask the same question, can we automate that? Can we put that into an app? Can an app say to you, hey, we noticed that you didn't upload today, and will you feel like you're being watched and therefore upload? It's an open question. It's an open question. I haven't seen anyone do it, but we have some examples, and I'll show you an example in a minute of a different program where we've automated a lot, and it seems to be quite effective, which is this. So personalization is really, I mean, these are all great opportunities, but personalization is an amazing opportunity. You all know that, of course, when you go, if the 2 of us went on the internet, we'd get a completely different browser experience, because whatever you searched yesterday and the day before is undoubtedly different than what I searched. And the sidebars are all populated with banner ads and so forth based on what these bots know about you. That's personalization. We can apply that to healthcare. It's not as easy to motivate you to do something healthy as it is to motivate you to make an impulse purchase. But there's something there. So let me tell you a story about another project from our group that illustrates this. This is called Text to Move. Started out as a texting initiative, being moved now to a mobile phone app. The goal here was to say, could we design a program with automated messaging, no human intervention, and motivate folks with type 2 diabetes to be more active in a meaningful way? Meaningful, it turns out, means does their disease improve? 6-month intervention. We take 4 data streams. One is this readiness to change, which just means we ask people a few questions about how interested are you in walking more? Do you really want to get active, or you just signed up because your doctor asked you, or you wanted a gift card because you're in a study? What's motivating you? So that's one, and we can refine that over the 6-month period because we can send a question out every week or so by outbound text to just keep refining that variable because people change over time. The second one is to give everyone one of these smart pedometers, Fitbit, or a device like that. The idea is we're going to get continuous activity level on that. So that's variable number 2. Variable number 3, which isn't on here, is weather. Weather is really a great variable for this stuff because people feel very personalized if you tell them something about their behavior that may happen tomorrow related to weather. It's there, it's simple, it's easy to capture. But if I say to you, Vlad, I know that you're more active when it's sunny out, because we know that now. The machine knows that. And it's going to be rainy tomorrow. Here are some things you can do indoors. People just think that's amazing, right? They really, that's like, wow, this thing really knows me. The more tricks like that we can play, the more we can win this game. And the last one is location. We know something about their location. So we have those 4 variables. We put them in the analytic engine. And I want to stress again, it sends out twice a day, automated, no human intervention, motivational text messages for 6 months. These are the results. The orange bar shows that the people in the intervention, randomized controlled trial, compared to the control group, had a 0.69 gram percent drop in hemoglobin A1C. Sorry, 0.62. Significant statistically and better than a therapeutic. Metformin gives you about 0.4. So connected health as a therapeutic. Think about that. And you can see those who are more highly engaged had a 1 gram percent, so that's even better. And we measure engagement multiple ways here. One, we measure by how often they open the text messages. And 2, we measure it on whether they actually wore the pedometer or not. So we have 2 really good ways to segment these people. Because as you can see, as good as we loved it, there's a group over there on the left that did poorly because they didn't engage. So once again, we flag them in a future state for some other kind of intervention. Maybe they're not coachable. This is a coaching intervention. Maybe those are the people that we should have put in the competition. Not sure. So that's what I mean by hyper-personalization. Think about that. Think of the power of that. If I know enough about you and all these other variables, so with your mobile device, I'll know where pretty soon, if these mobile payments start happening, I'll know where you had breakfast, I'll know when you went to Starbucks, I'll know what your activity is because I can know about the GPS and the accelerometer. I can really start to message you in a very fine way. If you'll allow us to collect that data, and if you're comfortable with us messaging you in that way. Lots of potential innovation here.
Joe, there's a question.
Okay. Yes, where? Sorry. Oh, sorry.
Yes, that's like my question basically, like from your presentation and things which I've been seeing, the HIPAA privacy issues and some other things, it seems like there could be a potential relationship that could be built between a person himself doing some of this stuff as well as a provider and a person in relationship with this. So can you speak a little more from the HIPAA initiative,
Sure.
how far this can go?
Of course. So a couple things on that. One is, I think, 2 themes on that I would offer. One is very specific to your question, and just to point out that HIPAA is a law that governs communications between healthcare providers and other businesses. It doesn't really govern communications between patients. So if you as a patient want to send me an email, I'm not a violator of HIPAA. If I send you an email back, I might. But if you send me an email and I send you an encrypted one back, we're fine. So part of this is going to be how much you want to share with me. And the other thing I'll say to that point is that to date, all the examples we have, as much as there's the brouhaha, importantly on privacy, it's very important, and there's a breach a day, it seems. People do things, they do trade-offs. They do things because of either convenience or there's a reward, or Facebook is free. Well, it's not really free. You're giving away a lot to be on Facebook, but people do it because of the trade-off. So I predict it will have language around that in the not too distant future where you as a patient or a member will have some trade-off options. Do you want to share all this stuff? Maybe if you do, you get a lower premium. If you want to keep it private, fine. Maybe you won't get a lower premium. You'll have options. That's my prediction on that. All right, everyday life. Again, I can't emphasize enough how we miss on this as healthcare providers because we're constantly sort of saying, if you don't lose 10 pounds, you're probably going to have a stroke in 10 years. Come on, we got to do better than that. That's not like, I got to go out and take the kids to soccer. I'll think about that tomorrow. I'm going to grab a Big Mac on the way. All right, that's the problem. We don't make it about everyday life. So I have some subheadings on this one too. The idea of subconscious triggers, we'll talk about that. Go where the consumer is, go where they are, get in their path. Really powerful. Why do we insist on making them do other things? And then focus on near-term goals is really important. What I mean by that, let's make it something that you can achieve. We can set a goal for the next week, month, 6 weeks, but not 10 years from now. So those are the three. And then state-of-the-art design, which I've already mentioned, but really important. Let's design this stuff so that people want to use it, not like most healthcare applications are designed. So let's go through those. Subconscious triggers is a fun one, and I will spend a little bit of time on this, but I really urge you to go to the website of the Truth Campaign or the American Legacy Foundation and look at this stuff because it's really entertaining and it's fascinating. So if you have teenagers, you may be aware of this. If you don't, you probably aren't. This is funded by tobacco settlement money, and it's marketing designed to do a fun thing, which is convince kids not to smoke without ever telling them not to smoke. It's brilliant. So this is a quick one. And they've used all viral this and that, and I mean, amazing. All the tools. This one is taking advantage of the fact that methane, which is in cigarette smoke, is also in feces, and urea, which is in cigarette smoke, is also in urine. And the kids get to vote by a Twitter campaign, which is grosser, pee or poop. So it's always reminding them that that's all in cigarette smoke. So brilliant, brilliant stuff. That's what I mean by subconscious triggers. So here are a couple of examples. I guess I didn't put an example in. I'll tell you an example on this one, which is we did a study. We were fascinated. So this is back in the day before smartphones, when we just had feature phones. And we wanted to ask the question, I'm a dermatologist, I think some of you know that, as to whether sending a daily text message would improve sunscreen adherence. A derm resident came to me and asked me to do that as a project, so I said, why not? And then I let the team go off and do their magic. I didn't get involved. And when it came back to me, someone had decided that it would be fun to send these daily messages with a weather report. Now, at that time, you didn't have the Weather Channel app. Again, you didn't have your mobile. So the idea that we would text you the weather report kind of turned out to be interesting. It wasn't designed to test that, but that's how it came out. So it came out, tomorrow is going to be sunny, don't forget to put on your sunscreen, that kind of thing. Well, it's actually in the morning you get it. Today will be 70 degrees and sunny, don't forget it, that kind of thing. And the people who got the message did really, really well. Big difference between the control groups, statistically significant. We wrote a paper, everyone was happy. We went back and asked the patients, subjects, tell us about it. What'd you find compelling? And they said, I don't know much about sunscreen, but I really like getting the weather report. That's what I mean by subconscious triggers. Find something that people care about and stick your messages underneath it. Very powerful. WellDoc is a company. Now, this is a company that I will tip my hat to. Again, I'm not endorsing them per se, but these guys were at it. You can see the picture of the feature phone. That's how long they've been at it. And they have done everything right, in my opinion. They started by creating a coaching solution on a mobile phone that was guided by an endocrinologist founder. They got FDA approval for their solution. They've gotten insurance companies to pay for it, and they're doing really well. And it's all because they put it in the path where the person is, the patient with diabetes. It's in their path. It's not hard to use. It's just there, easy for them to take advantage of. Well, doc. Omada's another one. So they're a little more up and coming, a little more hip, a little more San Francisco. But they've taken on a project, and they've had great success, which is diabetes prevention. Arguably, one of the toughest problems to solve because you don't yet have a disease. You're just kind of not there in your activity, diet, and genetics. So there's something any of you who know the area of diabetes know there's something called a diabetes prevention program. It's a well-established educational tool set for folks. The problem is people don't really use it, consumers, patients. So these guys did two things. They got everyone with a wireless scale. This is a scale that sends its data from itself to the cloud via a little mobile chip, the same kind of chip that you'd make a voice call with or send a text message. And then they had the DPP on a mobile app and a website. And people are using it. They're having fabulous results. And they're getting good results in terms of preventing people from getting diabetes because they're really engaging. So, and they're getting investment. They're doing well, right? People are flocking to give them money. They have some really, I forget which one, but might be Kleiner Perkins or maybe it's Andreessen Horowitz. One of those big name firms has just invested in Omada. They're doing really well. And it's because they designed it, again, so that it's relevant to what people want. It's focusing on their near-term goals. It's helping them achieve this goal of losing weight in the context of diabetes prevention. Design, I could have chose many for design. I chose MyFitnessPal. I've used it. I don't happen to like their app much. I don't like diet tracking much. I have a whole rant on diet tracking. But it's beautifully designed, and they have 50 million users. So it's hard to argue with that success in health, right? That's almost unheard of in health, without any doctor promoting it, without any 50 million people using this thing. So I tip my hat to them, and it's, I think, largely because of the way they've designed it. It learns as you go. It makes it easier every day to input your dietary information. It's hard at first, but it keeps getting easier and easier. It does all the things. I give you tips that you can integrate your other devices and track your weight and steps and all that, and it does a very nice job of that. So that's a good example of good design in my opinion. All right, I'm going to finish off now. This is sort of an add-on, but I think, again, we're here to talk about what are the opportunities, right, for entrepreneurs. And I can't not talk about big data a little bit. I know it's sort of everyone's tired of hearing about it. Enough already on big data. What about small data? Blah, blah, blah. People say that to me. No, Joe, the real issue is small data. Okay. Seriously, though, analytics. I heard a niche. I was had the privilege to speak at Mayo Clinic last week. They had the Transform conference, and someone threw out a term that I hadn't heard, SMAC technologies. You guys know about SMAC technologies?
Social, mobile, analytic, and cloud.
Exactly. I said, oh, that's cool. I'm going to use that one. So anyway, analytics. Analytics, very important. So we've talked all through this in various ways about new kinds of data collection from personally generated data, patient-generated or consumer-generated data. Step counts, dietary entries. Again, your GPS data, your mobile purchasing data. And companies are starting to take advantage of pulling that stuff together in really interesting ways. I would say that it's not done. It's not done. So if you think you might want to innovate in this area, there's still plenty of space to innovate because it's not done. But here are a couple of examples of things that may intrigue you. Treato is fascinating. Anybody know this company? So I think, done a brilliant job. They created a algorithm that does web crawling and looks for the mention of any pharmaceutical in a tweet, in a blog, in any kind of social media. They pull all that back into an analytic engine. They package it up, and pharma companies can't get enough of it. They're buying it as fast as they can create it because it gives them insights as to what people really think about their drugs. fascinating, fascinating. So they're going to be at our symposium, which, by the way, I'll take an opportunity to mention. October 23rd and 24th at the Seaport, the 11th Annual Connected Health Symposium. If you like any of this stuff, probably worth the price of a ticket to come for 2 days. It's all this kind of stuff and more. Ginger.io, local company, probably some people know them. Now they've been at it a while. They have a big vision. They're kind of, I think, maybe treading water just a touch because it's such a big vision. But their idea is that they can tell based on, for instance, not the content of your text messages, but how many you send in a day, how many outbound communications on your device, whether you're in a good mood or depressed or you need help. So it's this idea that as you use the device, they're able to run algorithms on your usage and predict things about your mental health. Now again, they have other things too. They're like I said, they're going to take other data and do other triangulations, but their initial space has been mental health. And they're having some success. It's an interesting concept. As I said, if they're able to achieve their vision, it will be really exciting. So I support them in that regard. And then Teradata. I kind of want to finish off with this one because it goes back to something I said earlier. Remember I said that the advertising industry has figured out how to really personalize and target stuff to us, which is really exciting. If you think about applying that in health, it's not exciting when you get beat down every day by them. But here's the thing. As I said, it's a lot easier to get me to click on purchasing an impulse purchase than to sign up for a program that I'm going to actually lose 5 pounds or walk 10,000 steps or take my blood pressure 3 times a week. So we've been thinking about that and that challenge. And this company I like a lot because, first of all, I always like it when I see things in other industries that we can learn from and bring into healthcare. I think that's really powerful. So these guys do a lot of analytics. They're a big analytics firm. They analyze everything for everybody. But one of the things they do is they work for the financial sector. And they have this thing that they're working on, which I thought was really kind of important. And again, Nick Agur from Teradata is going to be on a panel at our meeting as well. The idea is that it turns out that if you have a loan and you miss a payment, you're salvageable. But if you miss 2 payments, you're pretty much a write-off. So they have an algorithm to catch people who've missed 1 payment and convince them to start making payments again. That's a lot more like convincing you to do something healthy. So I like it. We're trying to learn from it. It's, again, very early stage. But the fact that they're able to do that, to me, suggests we can probably learn more from them than Amazon or Netflix or the consumer companies that are telling me to watch movies I really don't want to watch. So there are some implications. A lot of you have mentioned them. Privacy is one, et cetera. The one is the give the people what they want strategy for consumer apps doesn't apply here. So if you think it's going to be the next Instagram, think again. It's just not that easy. I'm sorry. If that's what you want to do, develop another Instagram. But if you want to get health, and believe me, we need people that are smart to be doing healthcare because it's really broken, it really screwed up, then it's going to be a little harder. And if we don't get engagement right, mHealth will go down in history as another tech bubble, which would be very sad because it's such an opportunity. We've never had this opportunity in history where we have this little thing in your hand that can collect so much about you. We can message you in the moment. It's always connected. So it would be sad for me if that happens. But if we don't get it right, it will, because people will stop investing and the companies will start to disappear. And people will say, well, I don't know, that was a dumb idea, right? Yet another telehealth failure. So it's our opportunity to get that right. Some companies are doing some of the things right some of the time, and that's about all I can say at this point. So again, really big opportunities for entrepreneurs to get involved and solve it. It's going to be hard, but I promise you it'll be worth the effort. That's all my contact information, and I'd be happy to take emails from anybody. We have some time to chat now if anyone wants to hang around. And as Alice mentioned, I'll be back in about a month. So questions. I'll start with you in the back. Yes?
Hi, thanks very much. Some of the apps you showed, I think, are very sexy and very slick. But for someone with low literacy, particularly the MyFitnessPal, I think it's great. But I think it would be terrifying for someone who can't read or has low literacy level, and that's a population, as I'm sure you know, we really need to be concerned about.
Yep.
So, are you guys thinking about people in that space?
We are. Thank you for asking, and I completely agree with you. So I showed, you're right, I showed stuff that's designed well for mainstream, relatively educated consumers. And that's another segmentation that we have to pay attention. And you're right, low literacy, not always, but often are people who need more healthcare attention. So we are working on that. We're designing some very simple things. We have an app in the field right now for cancer pain management that's really designed to be very simple to use. It's cutting across a number of socioeconomic folks that are using it, and we're having good luck with that. That's one example. So not solved, but working on it. Yes, please.
So you were talking about inspiration from the consumer side or engagement. So what if the main inspiration would be money in this case? So for example, I mean, you earlier said that as a healthcare provider, you had to share the risk. So what if the consumer or everyone has to share that risk too by, forcing them kind of into do these things, and that depends on how much they would pay
Sure.
for healthcare. Do you think that would be feasible?
There's some opportunity there. So there are a couple things on that we've learned, and again, other people study this stuff. I'm just a mouthpiece for this one, but. Number one, so monetary incentives as a tool to get people engaged work for some of the people short term and not long term. And then the problem is if you're doing a population, you kind of get into this endless loop of, okay, what am I going to give them now? $5 isn't interesting anymore. Do I up it to 10? So it's kind of good to get people's attention, but it's not a good long-term strategy. The other thing you mentioned I think is worth reflecting on, and I alluded to it in my talk, which is I might be able to say to you, we're going to lower your premium costs. So think of the model, I don't know how many of you know Progressive Auto, but they give you a sensor, you slap it on your car, and if you drive how they think is safe, they don't tell you, by the way, they just say, if we're going to monitor you, then they'll give you a safe driver discount. I think with all these health insurance exchanges and all this consumerization of health insurance, you will see someone offer a program where you get a Fitbit, and if you agree to walk 10,000 steps a day, you get a cut in your premium. That will happen. I don't know if it'll be next year or when, but so I think there's that opportunity. I do. Yes, please.
Just in terms of Fitbit, one of the things that I'm struck with is no understanding of what the implications are. So I had my annual physical, and my doctor said, well, what kind of activity are you getting? And I said, well, look, I got it right here. And he said, oh,
Yeah.
I wish I knew what that meant in terms of, so are there studies that show that, is 6,000 steps enough, 7,000, that's the type of thing that I think would be helpful if that were more available.
So a few things on that. Thank you for that lead-in. So we have a website, which I didn't mention. I try not to make this a commercial for our center, but we have a website called Wellocracy, where we talk about some of that stuff. It's really about self-tracking and educating people about the value of self-tracking, not just activity, but we've got sleep up there, we've got mood trackers, we've got a whole series of different trackers and a lot of content. And one of the things we've learned from launching that site is people are hungry for just what you said, like give me some context. The best we can do now is and I don't know the citation, so it could be complete urban legend, but what's out there is 10,000 steps a day is a good number. Again, I'm not a fitness buff, so I don't know if that's just someone made that up, or that's about 3 or 4 miles, so seems like a good amount to walk, but that's about it. And the other side about what you're talking about is really worth mentioning is the doctor side, that docs don't yet know how to deal with it. We have some very forward-thinking providers in our organization. Part of the reason I continue to work there is we have really fun doctors to work with, innovative, early adopters, people who don't look at me like I have 2 heads. And some of them are asking us, and we just actually completed an integration into our platform, another thing I didn't talk about, but we have a platform where all these patient-generated data are displayed in our electronic record and the patient portal. And we just completed Fitbit integration. So we'll learn now that we have it. And if a doc says, I want to track, just say, have them get a Fitbit. They can sign up online, and you'll see their data in the electronic record. We'll start to learn more about what that means. Yes, sir?
So I see like there is two problems actually in mHealth. One from the consumer side, when you were mentioning that you provide information, but you don't empower them to make decisions.
Right.
And I think this is a huge problem why in HipChat, HipChat would not probably work if you only look to the messages and
And you couldn't reply back, right?
Yeah, I mean, so that's one problem. On the second problem, on the second side, there is the healthcare, where healthcare actually don't know how to deal with this data. I mean, the physician, actually one of the biggest problems, they have so much data to deal with that providing that, how that could be incorporated in guidelines. How can you prove that? What are the evidence? I mean, actually anything that is implemented in healthcare go through an extensive clinical trial process that could last years. So where is the mHealth going to? Is it staying on the consumer side?
Good question. So that's a lot of question to answer, and it's as if I'm the oracle or something. But I would say a couple things. One is I agree with your first comment. Again, inspiration is important too, not just empowering, but inspiring. For most people, this stuff isn't inspiring. So I just want to go back to that. On the second part, two things about that is shame on any of us who design a program where we're feeding doctors 900 normal readings. Or a nurse, it doesn't matter. They're gonna turn it off immediately and be annoyed. We have software in just about every industry on the planet that calls out meaningful values based on rules. We can write rules. If blood pressure over 140, flag that value, et cetera. So we can design software to make sense out of this stuff, and we should. We don't know enough yet about activity to do that, but we certainly know on blood pressure and blood sugar how to do that. So we have some ways of doing this. It's not perfect yet. Again, it's an opportunity. All of it is. But I wouldn't throw it out. Please.
Within the partners umbrella, if you will, from a physician's perspective, what do they want? What do they, in terms of the adoption curve, what do you see over the next year or two in that 2015 window that might get adopted and used on a system-wide basis?
Yeah, that's a great question. So the context for the answer is that, remember, we are at risk with every payer. We have a generally more open-minded set of clinicians than average. So we'll do some things. Right now, virtual visits is kind of the hot topic, like, sort of Skyping with your patient, doing follow-up visits by video. We are actually all creatures who devolve to habit. And the idea in a lot of providers' mind is that I'm now comfortable. Remember, I started this 20 years ago, so it's been a slow journey, but now clinicians are comfortable that I might be able to Skype with my patient. That might make sense in some circumstances. They're less excited, except for some really important exceptions. They're less excited about the remote monitoring because of the avalanche of data, wary about the liability worry. We're working all that, and we have plenty of people using this stuff, but widespread, not yet. The people that are using it, again, one of the things that's fun about our organization is we made a commitment that every primary care practice would transform to this team-based environment. I don't like the name. It's called patient-centered medical home. It's a dumb name, but it's team-based care. And we're doing that. And the teams that are the most mature are really eager to do this remote monitoring stuff because they have a nurse that they'll put on the front end, or they have a pharmacist that does that. Well, my job is to manage the diabetics. Okay, great. We have a tool for you. So I see that as the future of adoption in that area. What else? Sir?
I'm just curious, as a clinician, with all these mHealth devices and apps, what's the information that you would want to see coming in, and what could then you put into your EMR system that maybe links to a reimbursement code?
Well, the last part you got me on. So just to say again that the reason that we even have any enthusiasm for this right now is because we're not worried about reimbursement codes. We're worried about taking care of patients as a system. And we internally have said, we'll keep our doctors whole. We've made that commitment to them. So if they spend 5 minutes looking at numbers in a remote monitoring sheet, they won't get dinged for that. right? So it's not that they can bill extra for it, but they're not going to get dinged for it. That's how we're approaching this. Up until then, I think the answer is, and I'm a dermatologist, so take my answer with a grain of salt, but if I'm seeing a patient with diabetes, type 2 diabetes, getting that context of what's going on in the home could be incredibly valuable. Their A1C's up, they're not responding, and again, you start to look and see patterns in the data that, well, it turns out that I'm too busy to go home after work and have a good meal, so I get a Big Mac and my sugar spikes. Well, let's talk about how we can fix that. You wouldn't know that if all you did was see someone every 3 months and say, how's things going? They're going pretty well. Your sugars are high. Yeah, I know, I'm working on it. That's the kind of meaningless conversations that our clinicians have every day with patients. And then they say, well, try harder. I will, doc. And that's the end of it. And that's dead. I'm dead serious. That's how it goes. Type 2 diabetes. So you can see the opportunity, I think. What else have we got? Yeah, go ahead. Yeah.
How much resistance do you see from doctors to change and use those new?
Well, right now, doctors, I mean, we're asking them to do a lot, right? We're asking them to fundamentally change the way they think about how they get financially rewarded for what they do. We're asking them to adopt guidelines. We're asking them to do team-based care. There's no shortage of things we're dumping on them. So we try to remind them that in that context, this should be, actually the way we say it is, this isn't, what I've showed you isn't really a tool for doctors per se. It's a tool for a member of your team who's in charge of managing the disease management part of the practice. Usually a nurse, sometimes a pharmacist. There was some in the back. Did you have something? Yeah.
I missed the first half hour, sorry. If you were to go to a country where infectious diseases were prevalent, what would be your one idea with one of these tools, whether it's personalization or
Sure.
or something? What would you do to?
Yeah, great question. I mean, so this is off the cuff, and I'm not an ID specialist, and I'm certainly not a tropical medicine specialist, so I'm going to wing it. But I know of a couple of examples. There have been successful programs that have been doing like HIV education using mobile. That's one. I know of a really interesting set of tools that are being developed. Those of you who know what DOTS therapy is, direct observation TB therapy, that an actual person goes from house to house and watches people take their pills. There are now tools that you can do on mobile phones to do that remotely, and a person can sit in a room and watch everyone take their pills house to house because they can do it on their mobile phones. There's another example I've seen in South Africa where the problem was that, and this is true in a lot of developing countries, people come in and you kind of have them for the day, but after that, follow-up is a big question mark. They may or may not come back. They got things to do, like their family and whatnot. They travel for 4 hours, and that's what you have. So if someone's coughing up sputum, you'd like to know if they have TB, but the lab is 2 hours away. They developed a system where these are very simple applications, where a motorcyclist would take the sputum to the lab would text back the result to the clinic. So while they have the patient waiting there, they could make the diagnosis of TB and treat. So things like that. You know, again, I think there are so many simple things we can do in the developing world. And mobile phones have leaped landline technology there. Everyone has them. Everyone uses them. So, yes, sir.
For going back to HIPAA and mobile health, there's one side of the debate that says these apps are generating health insights, so they should be regulated by HIPAA. There's a counter argument that says, well, this data actually already exists. It's already exists there in treasure troves. So if it already exists, why should it go under new regulations? What's your take on this argument, on the counter argument?
So I think of that in FDA context. I don't think of it in HIPAA context. HIPAA is about security and privacy, really. But I'll answer the question. You may be right. I'm not a regulatory specialist, but I think of it in the context of FDA. FDA now has a set of context to regulate mobile health, and that's been a good thing because for several years, like 2008 to 2011, there wasn't, and nobody was doing anything. They're all sitting on their hands because they didn't want to develop something and then find out that they had developed something that was a medical device unwittingly. So they have something called a Medical Device Data System, MDDS. And that means that if I'm using the mobile device as a conduit for information, all I have to do is let the FDA know, and I have to have a quality assurance plan. It's some work, but it's not an approval process. If the device has any kind of intelligence in the software that, again, as I said earlier, calls out readings or applies a rule or gives me a message that says your blood sugar is too high, then that software has to be registered as a medical device because there's the potential for safety, crossing the line on safety, which is what the FDA cares about. So again, I'm not used to thinking about it in HIPAA context, so if I missed it, I apologize, but that's what my take on that. Hi there.
Question. First of all, thank you so much for the talk. A really quick response, comment to the question or issue about should doctors or clinicians take more responsibility over patient outcomes. So while I'm a strong proponent of ultimate patient responsibility over behavior change, I do think there's tremendous room for improvement where, as far as doctors are concerned, or clinicians, healthcare providers. And I think that it's going to get better. I totally agree with you. As traditionally, doctors have not been all that successful in behavioral change. But I think gone are the days where, the hierarchy of medicine, I'm the doctor, you're the patient. What I'm saying, this is what I'm saying, this is what you have to do. So now there are techniques like motivational interviewing, which counselors and psychiatrists, therapists have been doing, but now as clinicians, we're doing a better job in using those techniques. And there's a lot of studies to show that MI techniques are very successful in getting people to quit smoking and cut back on drinking and whatnot.
Yeah, thanks for bringing that up, and I agree with you. We brought a lot of that on ourselves. And when I was growing up in Barry, Vermont, the common theme was and I did rotations there in medical school. The doc would say, "Now, honey, don't you worry about that. We're going to take care of you." And it's like, that's asking people to be disengaged. So yeah, we're doing better. Yes, Vlad.
So talking about innovating for doctors, I mean, one of the biggest pieces of technology that doctors have to use in a physician-patient visit is the EMR system. EMR systems for big healthcare like partners is taking on Epic. They've made very large investment in this. How do you innovate for physicians in that sense, in the largest technology that they use when the companies already have such a monopoly on the market and are not so keen in letting others make add-on technologies for it?
It's a great question. So I don't have a flip answer. I mean, I do have a flip answer, not a useful one, which is every big enterprise gets disrupted eventually. Epic will, you'll see. Microsoft's about to now, right? So for 20 years ago, we thought they would never get disrupted. So I don't know how that happens. I do know that in the context of incremental innovation, Epic allows us to do a lot. They're actually very good about that. And they're very good at customizing what they have to suit an individual client's needs. So again, I don't have any ownership of Epic, and I'm just perhaps as worried as you are about how they're going to change my life. But I do think that other than the true disruption, they're okay. They're probably the best choice, and they have a lot of ways that you can innovate on their platform. We're doing some of them at Partners. Yes, sir?
How do you envision the space of disease management in the mobile world?
I'll give a crack at that. I hope I'm answering the question. So one of the things that we think is very near term, which we're very excited about. So I mentioned earlier, we give people a blood pressure cuff and a hub. And we actually pay the data charges. So there's a lot of sunken costs in doing one patient's blood pressure. So therefore, we have to recycle the equipment. We can only do it for a month at a time, try to get them on the road to recovery, as it were, and then hopefully they've learned what they need to learn. But we think in the near term, and maybe HealthKit will do this for us, not clear, but that there will be opportunities, and there are already some out there, they're not widespread, but there'll be opportunities for us to give a patient a coupon and say, you go to the Apple Store or Best Buy, you can choose one of these 3 cuffs, we'll subsidize it, but you've got some skin in the game, and then just download the app to your smartphone. So you own the hub all of a sudden, you own the data charges, and we'll subsidize the cuff. That's how we see this going. And then, once you get people uploading, then it's all that analytics and choosing the right people and segmenting and interacting with the providers or, as I said, software that keeps them engaged. All those are possible. So I don't know if that answers the question, but
It's just like one of those things. I worked at a company which moved from disease management to wellness, and that became the new big thing, wellness management. So just like wanted to see how everything will play into
yeah, well, so again, now disease management has a new opportunity because as a provider, I care. I don't know when you did this, but there was times when health plans were the target, and they're really hard to sell anything to because they really fundamentally just want to do risk calculations and insure risk. I don't.
Well, I think we'll take
Got
one last question.
one last question, okay. Woman in the blue dress.
You just said as a provider I care, but like I'm just wondering, you're seeing those app where you can take the pictures of moles, for example, and by this I think it's very useful. Patients should be willing to adopt it, but doctors, it reduces the number of visits, so it reduces their income, so they have no incentive to go into that.
Right, so again, I can't emphasize this enough. In the context of risk sharing, that goes away because I actually don't want you to come in. I want you to be part of my plan and stay healthy and not hit my brick and mortar because I incur the costs. So it's a new world. There are other reasons why I might not want to have you adopt that software, but it isn't because it's lack of visits. We've crossed that boundary. It's really quite exciting, actually.
Well,
Okay.
You can join me in thanking Joe Kvedar.